Evening, Philippines. Good morning, good afternoon, world. Welcome to another interesting episode here at the English Blog. My name is Adrian.
I'm Christine.
I'm PJ.
And I'm Sarah.
We are the English Blog team. We're a blog of English teachers by English teachers and for English teachers. And as we start tonight's episode, we'd like you to comment below where you guys are watching us from, which country, which city, and what brings you here, what type of profession you do, and which company or school you work for. We'd really love to know in the comment section.
Today's episode is Season 3, Episode 7, Kickstart Creativity in Your Class. If you'd like to hear some insights about how to harness your creativity as a teacher and how to inspire creativity in your students, then this video is for you.
Don't forget that we provide customized lesson plans, curriculum mapping and unit planning services, life and career coaching sessions, and make sure you join us for our weekly vlog and visit our website to check up our most updated blog content related to ESL education, and that is www.theenglishblog.com. Do send us a message because we would love to hear from you.
In addition to our main site, theenglishblog.com, you can also find us all across social media. We premiere our vlogs like this one on Facebook. And we also give links to our blog posts and vlogs on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. So follow us on whatever platform you like best. And please, please, please talk to us. Talk to us about creativity in your classroom, what your most creative lesson has been, when you feel the most creative as a teacher. And let us know if there's any other topics that you want to hear from us in the future. We are here to talk to you about English. So let's talk together.
And here comes the first question. What does creativity look like to you as a teacher? Creativity to me is being resourceful of how you manage your time and resources. It's making something beautiful out of the mess that you have, whatever it is, and being brave and awkward at the same time as you show your vulnerable best to the world, because you have to be courageous enough to be creative.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Speaking about vulnerability and being courageous, I would say that creativity to me as a teacher is giving students the freedom to be themselves, or you as a teacher being completely yourself. But I want to talk a little bit more about students because students or schools tend to suck out the creativity out of students. And that's the last thing that they should do. And they often do that by punishing them and when they commit mistakes. And you want to give students the space to harness their natural talents, not punish them for committing mistakes. Another thing is designing empowering learning experiences for your students. You want to get them involved in the learning process and give them control over their education. One thing you can do is have them use their own devices, which a lot of people would be against, but to me, in my opinion, that gives them a whole new world of opportunities. And there are so many things that they can do with their mobile devices that they can't do with other things. And then give them class roles tailored to their skills, like leadership roles to more proactive students. Maybe students with stronger writing skills can be given the role of a grammar checker, like a peer grammar checker. So there are so many ways that you can empower students. And yeah, I do think that creativity, a large part of it is empowering your students and designing empowering learning experiences.
For me, whenever I hear the question, what is creativity for you? I think of a question that was asked of me at an interview. And some white dude, principal of some school. And he was like, he took a paper clip and he said, how many ways can you think of using this paper clip? And that for me is creativity. It's having a limited set of givens or perhaps you could say constrained circumstances, and being able to recognize solutions that are not easily apparent or visible. So, and to build on that idea, recognizing patterns specifically. So, being able to observe on a micro level patterns that aren't readily obvious, that I would say is an act of creativity, because you're having to put a lot of pieces together to come up with a whole idea. So those are some of the things that I think about when I think about creativity.
I completely agree with PJ. And I was thinking the same thing, especially for creativity in teachers, because I think when you talk about creativity in the classroom, as we will do on this blog, we're going to kind of subdivide it into students and teachers. So I think that creativity in teachers, especially, is what PJ said. It's finding new ways to connect seemingly disparate things, drawing connections between things that you hadn't thought about before. That I think is really important for a creative teacher. When I teach children, I find that creativity looks a lot like imagination and a lot like play, and a lot like sometimes it's crazy stuff that I could never come up with because I'm not a child anymore. I'm, there, that's part of your brain development. And then in teaching adults, and specifically as an ESL teacher to adults, I think that the adult student creativity, I most often see it manifest in personal expression. That is sharing their own thoughts and ideas that they formulated, and it just happens to be through the medium of English language. And we'll talk more about all of these different types of things throughout the blog, but yeah, it's everywhere, and you should find it and love it and not kill it, like Christine said. And that's what we're talking about today.
This is a really interesting topic, you guys. And for those of you who couldn't remember, our last topic, our latest one, is about Bloom's taxonomy. And the reason why we're discussing this is because creativity is at the apex of Bloom's taxonomy. That's why this is a really good follow-up to that discussion. And here comes the next question. What's the relationship between creativity and innovation? So in Oxford Living Dictionaries, creativity is defined as the use of imagination, as Sarah mentioned earlier, or original ideas to create something. Innovation, on the other hand, means a new method, idea, product, or etc. So here's how we connect these two. So I feel like creativity is actually the source, the birthplace of innovation. And before you get to innovation, you have to be persistent. You have to pursue managing whatever resources you have at hand, time, budget, paperwork, whatever you have there. And you come up with a product, a method, an idea. So how do we relate this to the educational context? According to Campbell and Berkey in their research paper in 2014 from cambridgeinternational.org, creative thinking is defined as the thinking that enables students to apply their imagination to generating ideas, questions, and hypotheses, experimenting with alternatives, and to evaluating their own and their peers' ideas, final products, and processes. And sadly, in some schools, that this happens maybe unintentionally from some teachers when they actually kill the creativity from their students because they want their students to keep drawing within the lines or to not rock the boat. But that is really essential in order for a school, an organization, a society in this world to thrive. And from Lev Vygotsky, who is the famous one of the famous authors of psychological development for children, he says in a quote, "Electricity is not only present in a magnificent thunderstorm and dazzling lightning, but also in a lamp, So also creativity exists not only where it creates great historical works, but also everywhere human imagination combines, changes, and creates new anything new. And that is why creativity is actually all encompassing, and I feel like this world will be boring without it. So what does it mean to be a creative teacher?
So for me, I think I'm always very concerned about boredom. So like because I myself get so bored so easily, like I have the attention span of a goldfish. So for me, I never I never want my kids to feel like any 2 days are the same. Like I want my kids to go and to tell their friends. I teach a lot of teenagers, middle schoolers. I want them to tell their friends, you know what? I every time I walk into uh, PJ's classroom, I never know what's gonna happen. I never know what I'm gonna do that day. I don't know if I'm gonna sit or stand or act or jump on the table or what. And so for me, it's like what I try to do as a teacher is I anchor a lot of my lessons on multiple intelligences. Because if you're doing that, then you are definitely having to be creative about your learning tasks and your assessments. There's no two ways around it. Um, Another thing I think a lot of teachers struggle with is how to be creative with all of the parameters and requirements. In this context, it would be the requirements and the parameters of the Department of Education. In a different, wherever school you're in, there's a curriculum, there's standards, you need to meet them, right? And so when we get into that framework, then what happens is sometimes in the effort to be a good and effective teacher, we get caught up on making sure we're hitting the standards, right? We're making sure that they're getting the lesson, but we're not always making sure that that high level of engagement is there, right? So if you're watching as a teacher and you're watching for the level of engagement in your classroom, then you have to be able to improvise on your feet, because once you start to develop this reputation as a boring teacher, it's like a stink. It can never leave you, you know? It's like you're only as good you're only as good as your last performance. And so you cannot do that. So I'll give you an example, all right? I was looking at I was teaching Lord of the Flies to 8th graders, and there were, all of these standards and metrics that I had to meet. And one of the underlying questions and one of the big ideas that we were talking about was the dichotomy between civility and savagery. And so what I ended up doing, and this I feel is very creative because I didn't get it from a book. I just thought of it on my own. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up having uh, these huge abstract nouns like justice, equality, those kinds of big ideas that make art. Art is a good one since we're talking about creativity. Culture, and they had to put it on a continuum as to whether this was part of a civilized society or a savaged society, and then they had to come up and argue why. So for me, that has a double fold purpose because uh, the birth of it, just like Adrian said, it was my creativity, but they themselves have to do a lot of creative thinking to be able to organize for themselves and reason in their minds what makes a creative society. So you can't always stick to the book, you can't always stick to the standards. Sometimes if you feel like you're losing your kids, you have to be able to adapt and improvise on the spot as a creative teacher. And I really feel like you should be willing to do that if you want to be successful.
I like that idea of the dichotomy. And when you have it on a continuum, you really give the students a lot of room. They can answer with so much variety, and it's not just A, B, C, but it's really left to them how they want to answer and reason. I also want to agree about the part with multiple intelligences. You don't just simply want to follow textbook activities. You have to ask yourself, what are other ways that I can present this material while targeting multiple intelligences? And same thing as PJ, whenever my students come to my class, I want them to wonder, what are they going to do today? Are they going to stand up and walk around? Are they going to jump around? Are they going to do a role play? Are they going to do some acting? And you want to engage them as much as possible by targeting as many multiple intelligences as you can. And that's something that I definitely strive to do. That being said, although you want to create new activities and not simply follow the textbook, you don't necessarily have to create brand new ideas and activities from scratch. This can also involve taking existing ones and making new variations of them, which is something that I like to do a lot. I like to scour the internet and find new activities, new things I can do in class, and then I might execute that activity in class and then later on make new variations of it, and it makes it so much fun. So yeah, find new activities online, maybe ask fellow teachers for ideas. You can at first execute them in the way that they're explained to you, and then you can tweak them and make them different, which I think is pretty creative. And when you find activities, just make sure that they're really engaging to begin with. Then if you see that students are not, or then if you see that students are enjoying the activities and they benefit from them, you can continue executing those activities, but make sure that there are different variations of it so that it doesn't feel repetitive to them. For example, I like to do this writing dictation activity. Actually, it's called running dictation. And basically, how it goes, and I found this idea online, is you take this block of text. That's how I found it online because they explained it to do it that way. Find any block of text. It can be related to the topic of the day or of the week, and then post it on a wall somewhere in the room, or you can even cut it up and post those strips of paper all over the room. And then divide the students into groups of two. And in each pair, one student is a runner, and then one student is a writer. The writers have to sit at their tables, and the runners have to go to the piece of text and memorize as much as they can, then walk back to the writer and whisper, dictate it by whispering. And whoever writes the full block of text first is the winner. And this one, I'm talking about this example because it's so much fun, and I have so many variations of this one game, and it's so engaging, as you can see, because students are running and writing and listening and speaking all at the same time. There's so much going on. And one variation I do is, like I said, you can have one block of text in one part of the classroom, or you can have several pieces of paper that, when put together, make that one block of text and then put them all over the room so that students get confused and they have to put them in order. Another thing is instead of a block of text, I have them do this activity with discussion questions rather than a block of text. And then after they do this running dictation activity, they discuss the questions with each other.
Nice. Those are really interesting insights, BJ and Christine. Let's move on to the next question. What does it mean to be a creative student? So earlier we discussed what it means to be a creative teacher. Now we're going to discuss what it means to be a creative student. So a creative learner actually needs to be able to develop and apply a set of skills that they can use in the creative process. These include being able to clarify, analyze, and redefine the problem or a question to uncover new ways of looking at it, ask thoughtful questions, notice connections between seemingly unrelated subject matter, challenge established wisdom by asking, how would I improve this? Recognize alternative possibilities, and look at things from different perspectives. And our role as a teacher is to really make our students think deeper, to avoid lazy thinking, and to provoke them to open up their minds to do worlds of imagination out there. What do you think about this, Sarah?
I agree that the root of creativity in students is that you are making something. You are making something, preferably something new, brand new, that could not be made by anybody else but you. And I think that in language classrooms especially, but really all classrooms, I think that, I guess, I don't know what I would call it, like a linguistic creativity. Like if you're a creative person and you're able to put it into words, you're going to do really well in school. It's designed for that kind of creativity. That's the kind of creativity that it usually engages and measures, kind of almost more importantly. And I think that that is a little bit of a mistake, because clearly the student who says their own idea in broken English is still more creative than the best student in the class with pronunciation who can only repeat what the teacher has said or what they've read. That's not creative. The first student is more creative because they're making something new, even if it is imperfect. And as all of us have said throughout this course, and Adrian mentioned before this, you really have to work with your students' imagination and their multiple intelligences. And I work a lot with kids, and it becomes really, really apparent that kids have different talents, different ways. They like, you need to include art, music, science, all of these other creative fields in your English classroom to help them acquire English, especially if they're children, because they're acquiring English similarly to how a native speaker would acquire English. I'm a native speaker, and I didn't sit there and my mom didn't tell me a list of 20 words to memorize when I was 3 years old. You learn it by actually doing it and by creating things, and you just happen to be doing it in whatever language that you're learning. And so just like mathematics, you're creating that, and the language is mathematics. You're creating music, and the language is music notation. So yeah, be very careful, because your students can be wildly creative and you can have no idea if you don't give them tasks that engage and harness their creativity. And you really need to do it, because that is the prime way to get them engaged in your class. As PJ said, you don't want it to be boring. And to acquire language, you need to be actively engaged. You need to use more of your brain than just the language part of your brain. And you do that by tapping into creativity, and you do that well when you're tapping into the creativity of this person in the ways that they like to be creative, in the ways that they are creative.
Can I add something?
Go ahead.
Also, with creative students, especially when they're younger and they have not developed that ability that Sarah was talking about being able to explain and connect their ideas, a lot of times those kids can sound that they're just blurting out stuff. And it's totally like you don't get why they're saying something, right? Like, he was on the chair, he was on the chair, and you're like, where, what chair? You don't even know, like, how did they came to that conclusion, like how did they make that inference. And it might sound really bizarre to you, but the more creative young kids are, the more chance you have to give them to explain how they came to that conclusion. Because if you just dismiss them initially, then you're not going to be able to see how they got to that point. And their train of thought, especially with wildly creative kids, their train of thought is not linear at all. It is completely sporadic. And so what a normal person might make connections uh, uh, to each other about, the kids, these really, really wildly creative kids, are going to make very disparate connections, like Sarah mentioned, seemingly completely unrelated connections. So just keep that in mind also with your creative kids. Like sometimes they're just going to sound nuts, but you got to give them a chance to explain.
Yep, those are really interesting thoughts. And you guys have been hearing the word multiple intelligence. the past few minutes as you've been watching this episode, please do check out. We have a video recording on that. Check out the videos tab of Facebook, and you'll be able to find the Multiple Intelligences episode. How can you inspire creativity in your students, Christine and Pete?
You want to encourage your students to be as real and authentic as possible, and I think this is something that we've brought up quite a few times already. Yes, it's important to teach your students the rules and mechanics of activities and of class so that everyone's on the same page, but it's equally important that you give students the space to just be themselves. And I actually want to recommend a TED Talk, which is by Sir Ken Robinson. I think this one is at least 10 years old now. I think I can see Adrian smile. He might be familiar with this
I've
one.
seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really good one. It's a 20-minute video, and it's called Do Schools Kill Creativity, which is another thing that we've talked about quite a bit in this video. So I just wanted to bring up some of his key points because they are so true, and I wholeheartedly agree with them. One thing that he says is that all children have natural talents and that we just end up wasting them, and mostly through conventional education systems. And kids, by the time they grow up, have lost the capacity to be wrong because of the stigma of making mistakes. We have stigmatized it. And if you're not prepared to be wrong, he says, you won't make anything original or creative. And that is so true and very powerful. We don't grow into creativity, we grow out of it. And that's what we do to a lot of kids in schools. So I think that schools have rigid ideas about what a successful person is. It's like someone who's good at math and science, someone who gets high scores on standardized tests, someone who gets into a top ranked university, and someone who has a high income. And those things can all be wonderful, but that can kill the creativity in our students. And maybe we should focus more on utilizing their talents and less on correcting their mistakes.
Yeah, that's why, as mentioned earlier, it really takes vulnerability and courage to show your creativity to the world, right? Because you will be criticized for sure.
So, yeah, so I just want to build on what Christine said, which is that, yes, I agree with this whole idea. I think the fastest way, I think the flip side of this question is how do you kill creativity? This is the flip side of this question. So let's talk a little bit about that. And then I'll talk about what we can do to inspire, because they're two sides of the same question. All right. So this whole thing about not allowing your students to make mistakes, especially in the language classroom, but generally as a learner, you need to throw this idea out as a teacher, right? You know, like I said before, it's like sometimes when they give you an answer, you've got to be able to give your students the benefit of the doubt and ask them to explain how they came to that conclusion before jumping at a student and shutting their reasoning down before they've had a chance to explain it to you will definitely kill that creativity, right? The other thing is, you want them to have um, a mentally flexible and agile mind, because that's what's required in the 21st century. Technology and innovation is pushing us to confront new ideas about our existence, about the ways we live our lives. And if we are afraid to make mistakes, we might get so rigid in our thinking that we're ignoring new data that's coming in that's telling us that there's a better way to do something. There's a more efficient way to do something, because we want to stick to this old boomer way of doing things that is no longer relevant for today's world, right? So let's go back to Bloom's taxonomy. When he came up with that taxonomy about knowledge, and at the bottom, he was actually such a forward thinker, because when it comes to knowledge, there's Google. That first level is moot already. We want, when new knowledge comes in, that you can synthesize. So we go back up. New knowledge comes in, you can synthesize this new knowledge Look at the data and come to new conclusions. Come to conclusions that we can actually apply in a real context. And we're not going to be able to do that if we just keep, doing the mold that was set before. So that's the piece I want to build on about what Christine said. The other thing that I do with them is, because I'm a literature teacher too, or what a lot of students like to do is they're like, oh, I'm going to impress PJ and I'm going to go on cliffnotes.com, and I'm going to get the interpretation of the text and I'm going to sound oh so smart, right? But what I do is I go and I read all of that stuff online already, and then what I tell them is, you need to give me a different interpretation of what somebody else wrote. So, in other words, if you're going to Cliff Notes and you're going to give me that interpretation, you're not exercising any kind of creative thought. I tell them, you can tell me that Romeo and Juliet is about two aliens from outer space that are here to take over the earth if you have the textual evidence to support that idea. That's what I tell them. And that just blows their mind, because that means that they can pitch any argument to me as long as they can support it in the text. Right. And so what ends up happening is, and I really force them, I really challenge them. I'm like, disagree with me, challenge me. And then when they give me one of those initially before they write their paper or they give their argument, if I know that they've taken something that is already out there, I will tell them to their face, that is so boring and unoriginal. It's already been done. It's already been said. You're not contributing to the literature in any way to move it forward. And then they just, that kind of challenge, and it's not coated in anything. It's just, give me your original thought. That inspires them. Then they end up going back to the text and looking for clues for an original interpretation. And even if their interpretation isn't original, the next time they do the paper, they're not going to go to Cliff Notes, because they're scared that the idea that they come up with is already there and they can't use it. So these are some of the ways that I do this mental stuff with them to get them to be creative and inspire them to be creative.
Nice. Awesome. Finally, we've come to the last question, and that is, why is creativity important? So for me, creativity is like air. We need it every single day. We have to be resourceful. We have to manage whatever time and resources we have around us. And can you just imagine if we're all the same in the way we think and dress and talk? It would be really a boring world. And I feel like creativity is actually in nature, and it's innate in all of us. It's just, maybe it's the school or maybe it's the society. That is why some people would say, I'm not really a creative. I'm not genius level or something like that, because society has set certain standards to label something or someone as creative. And that is why people fear the vulnerability, and you feel like you're naked because you're out there and showing your true colors and your creativity to the world. But then really, our imperfections, there's actually a quote I just suddenly remember. It says something like, it's through our cracks that where the light comes in or shines through, or something like that. And if we're all perfect, oh man, for sure that will be boring. That's going to be a boring world. What do you guys think?
For me, I'm kind of like what some of you said here. I hate boredom, and if you as the teacher are feeling bored in class, then you can be rest assured that your students are 10 times more bored than you are. So that's something that's always on the back of my mind. Are my students having fun? Are they engaged? Are they interacting with me? Are they moving around, doing something? So I try as much as possible to be creative, to break monotony and to prevent my students from being bored. And then not only that, but to give my students something to be excited about. I want my students to say, wow, I can't wait to go to teacher Christine's class because I have no idea what I'm going to do today and I have no idea what I'm going to learn, but it's going to be great. And there's just nothing more rewarding for me. I guess this is kind of the selfish part of me, but I love when students tell me that my classes are creative and that they enjoy the activities in my class and that they had never thought of such a thing before. So I think it's great for every teacher to be that way, to constantly be on their toes and ask, what can I do that's different, that maybe hasn't been done before? Or maybe it's been done before, but I can tweak it a little bit and make it my own. So that's for me.
I think for me, it's two prong. So the first thing is creativity is important for me because I always think about this other cliche, which is, or saying, which is, if you know, you're not going to have a very intelligent fish if you ask a fish to ride a bicycle. But if you ask a fish to swim, it's a very intelligent fish. And so that's not the exact quote, but you get what I mean. Um, and I always think about that quote and about how people are intelligent in different ways. And I don't ever want a student to walk away from a time of being in my class, however long I have them, and feel like they never got a chance to really express themselves or shine, you know, about who they are. Exactly what Christine said about who they authentically are. I don't ever want to be a teacher that didn't allow the light to shine in through the cracks, to pull again on Adrian's. So that's part of it. I'm creative because I'm always thinking about my students' best interest. And if you're a good teacher, that's what your focus should be on, your students' best interest, right? That's probably why you're watching us right now. So you're automatically a better teacher than the rest of them just by watching us. And the second part is, I can't really speak for anybody else, but for me, I became a teacher because I believe in social justice and economic justice and environmental justice. I want to leave this world a better place than how I found it. And the fact of the matter is that our world is changing faster than we can keep up with. And because of that reason, we are suddenly finding ourselves facing problems that we've never had to face before. And it's going to take all of us coming together to find creative solutions to be able to solve these kinds of problems. So if we're not nourishing that kind of thought in our classroom, then how are we really preparing the next generation of leaders to tackle these incredibly complex global problems? We're so tied to each other economically, even culturally to some degree. So these questions, they need answers, they need solutions that are beneficial to us all. And we can't get there on our own. We need to work with each other. So we need to in fact, we need to like exponentially combine this kind of creativity with each other so that we can come to a solution, right? So we really need to be encouraging unique intellectual rigor already at this level.
So yeah, I agree with PJ, and I think that she and my colleagues have spoken about creativity, especially macro level, really well. So I want to bring it back down to conclude with back to you and your student and the moment that they're acquiring language. And creativity is, I believe, probably the most powerful tool that you have to attach the creative process to language acquisition or whatever they're acquiring, whether it's critical thinking about literature or math or whatever. Your goal is to attach what you want them to learn with something creative that they want to create. And when you do that successfully, whatever you're trying to teach them is going to become part of who they are. It's it gets taken inside. And so I want to give a funny example. I was in Spain and I was teaching a 7-year-old girl who had just started English at school. She had very little English. She was really sweet, classic 7-year-old girl, loves to play pretend, loves to play dress up, hates to sit down. And I have no idea why, but her school book decided that they wanted to teach English through like Paleolithic life. Like there was a unit on being a cave person, and she's there. I think she was learning imperfect tense a little bit, used to maybe. And then she was learning all these crazy words that I was like, this is not an essential word for a 7-year-old girl in Spain to know, because it was stuff like fur, spear, fire, that like all that kind of stuff. I was like, this is a little bit crazy. So I wasn't sure how to approach it. And so I started with the classic, let's do some flashcards, let's do some charades. But she was having none of it. And so finally, like PJ said, you got to be a quick thinker. I said, we're throwing this lesson out because it's not going anywhere. What do I know this girl loves to do? And I know she loves to play pretend. And I know she loves other people's stuff. She loves my scarf. She loves my clothes. She loves having a stranger in her house. So I said, scratch this. Okay, I told her, here you go. Here's your picture book, which the school already given her. You've got the picture, you've got everything, okay? Your job, I'm gonna give you 10 minutes, and I'm gonna give you my coat, and I'm gonna give you this long stick, and I'm gonna give you all of this paper and all of these pillows, and your job in 10 minutes is to make a play for me, to make a story for me that you're gonna act out. And she was so excited. First, she took all the stuff and she starts making her little hut, which is the word she learned. And she's taking it and she's making a pillow. And I call out and I say, what is that? And she says, hut. And I'm like, good. So she constructs her set. As she's doing it, I kind of cue her on what is this? What are you putting on? It's my scarf, but she calls it fur. So I'm like, great, we're good. And so then finally she's practicing and she starts to play in English. She starts to say all of the words in English, because I'm not sure she knows the word for arrowhead in Spanish, to be totally honest with you. And so then it was time and I said, okay, are you ready for your play? And she said, yes, and you're in it. And I said, okay. And so she throws my coat over me. I'm on all fours, and she makes me a woolly mammoth. And her play is her killing me and narrating her hunting this woolly mammoth and then cooking it in a little pot of fire. And she did amazing. She used all of the vocabulary from the unit. She got her past tenses in there. She was usually very shy and like nervous about speaking English. She didn't like the foreignness of the words, but because it had been attached to this completely creative process, she was thinking in English. She was interacting with this world and with me completely in English. And it was amazing. And so I just want you to remember those are the moments when you attach what you want them to learn with something that they're doing and they're making. That is the magic combination to get you really solidified in there and to acquire whatever you want them to acquire.
Nice. Wow. I'm just really laughing out of joy and with the creativity of my team with Sarah's story. And I don't know about you guys are watching this, but I can really feel that I'm learning a lot from my team. I love my TEB team, and I hope you guys also love us. So we'd like to see that in the comment section, and would like to know your thoughts about creativity. Leave it in the comment section and maybe give us your tips as a creative teacher to your students.
Don't forget, we provide customized lesson plans, curriculum mapping and unit planning services, life and career coaching sessions, and weekly vlog and blog content related to ESL education. Please do get in touch with us. Visit us at www.theenglishblog.com or send us a message on our Facebook page. We would love to hear from you.
So beyond our webpage, we're also active all over social media. You're probably watching this video on Facebook, where we premiere all of our vlogs. And as Adrian mentioned earlier in the video, you can find all of our past vlogs on Facebook. So check out our Bloom's Taxonomy blog. That's related to this one. Check out our Multiple Intelligences blog, as well as lots of different articles on all sorts of topics. We're mostly active on Facebook, but you can reach out to us on LinkedIn, on Instagram. Please share with us your best creative teacher moments. If you've ever been fake killed by a student like I have several times, actually. And let us know whatever you want to hear from us next. We're here to help you. Thank you so much for watching and supporting and being part of this creative process with us.
Wow, that's just a really wonderful episode. So, dear teacher, fellow learner, a lifelong learner, and fellow student of life, don't forget to stay tuned next Friday, because next Friday's episode is going to be the last for this season, and we're going to meet you again in January. So watch out for that next episode. Once again, my name is Adrian.
I'm Christine.
I'm PJ.
And I'm Sarah.
And we are the English Blog team. Keep learning, stay healthy and happy. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.